HTG crew, what's up, what's up? US Open week, baby! We're at Torrey Pines down in San Diego. It's going to be a hell of a week. Weather's supposed to be in the mid to high 60s / low 70s. No rain accounted. I mean, it's going to be an awesome week. I plan on heading down there to Torrey over the weekend to check out some of the action. So, hopefully we get a good event. Man, guys, we got our asses beat a couple weeks ago. We were off for the Palmetto Championship at Congaree, but got our asses beat a couple weeks ago prior to that. So we're coming back with a vengeance here this week, guys, and we're gonna be taking a little bit of a contrarian approach this week. No pun intended with the approach pun. And doing some things that a lot of the industry is not going to do this week, and that can be really scary, but it could also pay off big time for us. Been putting a lot of research in this week, so I'll mention what I mean by our contrarian play after I get back into some smoke on the podcast. It's been a while, but we're going to get back into it. Today I'm smoking Biscotti. The grower is Elyon. It's an indica testing at 20.76% THC. And remember, guys, I haven't smoked on the pod for a bit, so you're going to have to bear with me today for US Open week. And when I said I did a lot of research this week, I literally went player by player down every player in the Draftkings pool and took a look at every single one of them, even the absolute scrubs down at the bottom in the 6K range, which you can literally cross those guys off. These guys either played the best round they've ever played in qualifying, or, just are guys maybe that were top 100 players back in 2015, 2016, then, 2017, but now can barely even crack the Korn Ferry Tour. Like, it's a bunch of randos that you don't want to have any stock in. So I even looked at all of those guys, and, yeah, it's been a long week of research, guys. Long week of research. I went hole by hole over Torrey Pines in a more in-depth way. If you guys remember last year for the U.S. Open, we did a winged foot course preview with my buddy Wes, who went hole by hole and sort of told us what we could expect. I want to do the same this year for the U.S. Open, given that it is the most difficult golf tournament that these guys see all year. Usually, typically, maybe, the year that Brooks destroyed Aaron Hills would be the exception. But, I mean, Bryson at Winged Foot last year, he's our defending U.S. Open champion, shot 6 under on that incredibly difficult golf course that both Wes and I thought nobody would break par at. The last time we saw Torrey Pines at a U.S. Open, of course, was the infamous win by Tiger Woods in a playoff over Rocco Mediate. And Tiger and Rocco both finished at 1 under that year. So we do expect that this golf course will play pretty difficult. Of course, since that 2008 U.S. Open, the course has been remodeled a bit. Some of these green complexes have been changed. But for the most part, it's playing pretty similarly. Of course, we see Torrey Pines at the Farmers Insurance Open every year. At the Farmers, it plays at a par 72. But for the U.S. Open, we're playing it at a par 71. Torrey is situated there in La Jolla, California, just outside of San Diego. Plays at 7,652 yards, and we're on POA greens. 7,652 yards for par 71 golf course is going to be incredibly long. Again, as I mentioned, typically the sixth hole plays at a par 5. During the Farmers. It's actually going to be shortened a little bit and play at a par 4. So during the Farmers, it'll play around 550 yards, very reachable par 5 for these guys. It's going to play as about a 520-yard par 4 this week. So I imagine it's going to be one of the more difficult holes in the field. And Torrey also played as a par 71 in 2008 during that U.S. Open. So nothing that we have not seen before. So before I kind of go over what my ultimate skill set that I think you're going to need this week for the U.S. Open, and this is where we're going to differ from a lot of the folks in the golf industry, let's take a quick run through of Torrey Pines hole by hole, starting with the first all the way through the 18th, and just get a quick rundown of what each hole is going to look like so we can build an overall picture of the type of golfer that we're looking at. So Torrey Pines, we're on the South course, of course, which is the championship course, the tournament course. As I mentioned, par 71, playing at 7,652 yards. The first hole, a par 4, 446 yards, and this is from San Diego Tribune, did an awesome article, a hole-by-hole walkthrough. That's what I'm reading off of here. First hole's a par 4, playing at 446 yards, was the third hardest hole in the 2008 edition of the U.S. Open. Tiger Woods actually played this hole 6 over in that U.S. Open, recorded 3 double bogeys and a par. So clearly this hole can present some problems, especially right out of the gates for these guys. You want to be left center of the fairway. Really, you just want to find any piece of this fairway, but the left side will give you the best angle to approach the green. Bunkers right off the tee are absolutely dead. So it is absolutely crucial that you find the fairway, and even more crucial that if you're going to miss, you miss on the left side. That's the correct side to miss here on number 1, but certainly going to be a difficult hole. Again, played as the third hardest hole in 2008, and Tiger Woods played it at 6 over par over his 4 rounds with 3 double bogeys. So we know how good that guy is. He ended up winning the event. So number 1 going to be one to look out for, and it's long too, right? At 450 yards. I mean, it's not long, but it's not short. It's not a hole where I think these guys are necessarily going to be able to take an iron off the tee. They will be having some sort of metal in their hands, and it'll be crucial that they find their fairway with it. The second hole, much shorter hole, one of the shorter par 4s on the golf course, coming in at 387 yards. We might see some guys like Bryson, the Matt Wolfs of the world, try to just bomb it at this thing and bomb and gouge this hole a little bit. But, this green it's tough. And if these guys get too close to the green and aren't able to get some spin on the golf ball, it's going to present some problems for them. It's going to be a theme throughout, looking at these holes, is you're really going to want to be able to play some spinny types of shots into these tight pin locations. And so if you get yourself too close to the green, especially with how tricky these green complexes are, you could, and with how thick the rough's going to be, you could find yourself in more trouble than if you just, take the more prudent approach and lay it back a little bit. So I expect most players to hit, some sort of iron off the tee, maybe like a hybrid or something like that. But most players will hit some sort of iron off the tee and then try and spin a wedge in there close. But I'll be interested to see what the longer hitters like the Brysons and the Wolves do here and see if they maybe try to make it a risk-reward hole and attack it. Then the third is a par 3. It's coming in at 195 yards, played as the 11th most difficult hole in the 2008 U.S. Open. This is going to be one of the more vanilla holes on the golf course. So the pin position will really dictate how difficult this hole plays, but it should play, in the 9th to 11th hardest hole range. Back left pin location, looking like it's going to be the most difficult. Maybe it'll make it one of the, in the top half of the most difficult holes. If it is in that back left, the pin is in that back left location. But aside from that, it's really just a distance control and having the right number type of play here, as the hole plays downhill, but typically plays into the wind. So you're going to have to club down for the downhill, but likely club up for the into the wind. So finding their number is going to be the important thing here. But aside from that, it's a fairly straightforward hole. And they do note here at the San Diego Tribune that par is a good score. I think you can really say that about almost every hole around Torrey, the South course, especially during U.S. Open setup where the rough's going to be incredibly long, aside from maybe the 18th, which is a hole that these guys probably expect to go out there and make a birdie on. The par 4 fourth is a 486-yard hole, played as the 6th most difficult hole in the 2008 U.S. Open. It's entirely along the ocean, so left is no good. You're going to be going off the cliff sides there. Aside from that, you really just want to find yourself in the fairway because this green is one of the most narrow greens on the golf course. It did have a redesign, which makes it play a bit easier. There's a slope off the right side of the green you can use to funnel the ball back toward especially a pin location that's on the right side of the green. But again, with the green being so narrow and the rough being so long, another hole you're really going to want to be able to spin your approach into. And because of that, a premium is going to be placed on finding the fairway here at the fourth. which, again, 486 yards. You're going to have some type of metal in your hand off the tee. So these guys that are going to be able to find fairways off the tee will be huge. The fifth hole, par 4, 452 yards. You can tell we have a lot of 450 to 500 yard par 4s here at Torrey at the South Course. We have bunkers on both sides of the fairway off the tee. So again, you're really going to need to be able to find the fairway here. A little bit of a shorter hole. So this is when maybe the bomb and gouge types of approaches might be able to work. Get yourself up there close enough to the hole, and even if you don't find the fairway, maybe you can hack something out of the rough onto the green. But if this pin location's back right, good luck getting anything close to the hole if you're not in the fairway, because you're absolutely going to be able to need to spin your approach in. And everywhere else on the green, if it's not back right, back left or anything, middle or front of the green should be somewhat manageable. But again, you're going to want to spin your approach in, especially if that pin's back right, and it's certainly not going to hurt in any other pin location. So another hole where we're really going to want to find the fairway, maybe not as important as some of these slightly longer par 4s, especially the ones with the narrower greens that we're really going to need to spin our approaches into. But again, we're sort of keeping this theme of fairways hit and strokes gained approach. The sixth hole, as I mentioned, plays as a par 5 during the Farmers. We're going to play it as a par 4 at 515 yards. I mean, it's a deep par 4, obviously, as you guys can imagine. These guys are going to be hitting mid to long irons into this hole, so really going to need to find the fairway here if you're going to want to have any chance of holding the green with a mid to long iron. Unless you're one of these guys that just hits the ball absolutely sky high, the Rory McIlroys of the world that can just take a 5 iron or a 6 iron and flight it up in the air like it's an 8 iron. Those guys will be playing with a huge advantage this week, I think, as far as being able to hit those approaches with some height, getting some lift on those, and getting them to land soft into the greens. But aside from that, I mean, these high swing speed guys that bomb it off the tee, I'm not as convinced as seemingly everyone else in the golf industry that's going to be the approach this week. The seventh is a par 4 playing at 460 yards, another one of these par 4s that plays in the 450 to 500 yard range. Another hole where you have to be in the right position in the fairway off the tee. You got to be left side of the fairway, left center of the fairway, especially if that hole location's back right. This is the theme that we have. You want to be left center of the fairway to be able to attack these back right pin locations, because you're going to need to be able to spin the ball into the green to hold it in order to hit it close in proximity to these pin locations. So another situation where you're going to need to find the short grass with the driver, hit a solid approach that's going to need to be able to have some spin on it. Guys should be able to play, some of the shorter irons into this hole at 460 yards. So that should be no issue as far as holding the green, as long as you're coming out of the fairway. The eighth is a par 3, 173 yard hole. It's going to be the shortest hole in the course this week. Again, it's going to be not dissimilar from the other par 3 on this side, the third. It's going to be all about distance control and making sure you have the right number. You're going to be playing into some windy conditions on this hole. And you also have to consider the levels to this green, a very undulating green, one of the more undulating green surfaces on the course. So you'll definitely want to make sure that you have your numbers dialed in. You find yourself on the right level of the green, and just getting the right number is really the difficult part here. Aside from that, the golf shots are pretty straightforward. As long as you find yourself on the right level, you'll have a good look at birdie. The ninth, par 5, 609-yard par 5. We finally get our first and only par 5 of the front 9, again, because the sixth is playing at a par 4 for the U.S. Open. 609 yards, man. It's even longer than it was in 2008. You can see, bunkers that sort of stagger the fairway here, as well as a cross bunker that will come into play for the second shot, I believe, for some of these guys that are going to be going for the green in 2. And if you do get caught up in that cross bunker going for the green in 2, trying to bounce one up there, it's going to lend to a long bunker shot. And we know that long bunker shots are the hardest shots in golf. even for these pros. You find yourself with a 30, 40-yard bunker shot. It's just an uncomfortable shot to hit. So it'll be really interesting risk reward wise. And this is one of the holes that I think bombers will really benefit from. If you can't already tell, the narrative that we're going to try to work against here is that this is going to be a bomber's paradise. This hole definitely screams bomber's paradise to me. It was the 16th most difficult hole in 2018, so the third easiest hole. Guys are expected to make birdies here. The non-bombers are going to be laying it back short of that cross bunker and wedging it in. So the bombers really do have an advantage if they can pump one out there, 330 yards, and then attack this green in two without having to worry about the cross bunker. Obviously going to present a huge advantage. But this is really the first hole on the golf course so far that I think presents a noted advantage to the bombers in the field. 10th hole is a par 4, playing at 449 yards. So again, right at that 450, to 500 yard range. It was the 14th most difficult hole in 2008. It's a pretty straightforward golf hole. One where it should be pretty easy for them to find the fairway. Really, it'll depend where the pin positions are, how close these guys will be able to get in proximity here. Another hole where back right is going to be more difficult pin location than any other on the golf course. It has been lengthened since it was last played. Played it shorter than 449 yards before, and that's why it was the 14th most difficult hole. It might tick up a little bit in difficulty if these guys are hitting, maybe a little bit longer irons into the hole, but all these guys have gotten so much longer on tour since 2008 that I'd suspect the approach shots are probably with a similar club as they were in 2008. So I expect this hole still to be one of the easier holes on the golf course. Not necessarily a birdie hole, but one that if you're not walking away with par, you're definitely, losing some ground on the field. The 11th hole. I love this hole. This hole's going to be a monster this week. Par 3, plays at 222 yards. In 2008 was the 5th most difficult hole. Wouldn't be surprised if it checks in more difficult this year. Had 158 bogeys or double bogeys in 2008. The only hole that even came close was the 16th in 2008, which netted 127 bogeys or double bogeys. So as far as making people take a bogey or a double bogey, no hole was more difficult in 2008 than number 11. We will see the yardage change like with most par 3s, especially in U.S. Open setups. They like to give these guys different looks, so I assume it moves forward inside of, 200 yards for a round or two. And then I expect a round where they push this bad boy back to, 240 yards. And that day, this hole will definitely, in my opinion, play as the most difficult hole on the golf course, especially if the wind's blowing. 11's going to be an absolute monster. It's going to be long irons, and if it ends up playing into the wind somehow and is pushed back, some of these guys might have to take a hybrid or something off this tee. I love this hole. One to watch, especially, as guys make the turn on Sunday. You can have some chaos here. And for Showdown, and even maybe for Showdown Thursday, I'll say, not necessarily for a full tournament, but I might want some guys that start on the front nine, because I feel like playing this hole as your second hole of the tournament is just kind of a tough ask. I'd rather have my guys have those 10 holes under their belt and sort of already have a vibe going into their round before they step to this daunting tee. So I might look to stack some guys that start on the front nine for Showdown contests on Thursday. See how that works. The 12th hole, back-to-back monsters at 11 and 12. The most difficult hole in 2008, par 4, playing at 501 yards. Usually plays into the wind, which is going to make it obviously play even longer than that. There were only 15 birdies made on this hole in the 2008 U.S. Open across 4 rounds of all of the world's best golfers. 15 birdies were made. Par here is a phenomenal score. You're absolutely going to have to find the fairway off the tee here. If you hit the ball in the rough, you can almost basically just card a 5 or worse instantaneously. You don't even really have to worry about it. So I mean, the 12th, 11, 12 is going to be a stretch. 11, 12, 13 is really going to be a stretch to watch because the 13th, a pretty easy par 5. You're going to really want to make birdie there. If you can come around this stretch at even par or better, you're doing well. The 13th, par 5, 612 yards, was the 17th easiest hole in the 2008 U.S. Open. It will be playing as the longest hole on the golf course, but I mean, there really isn't much trouble here unless you're Phil, who took a 9 here in the 2008 U.S. Open. It does play very uphill to the green with a false front. That's what Phil got caught up in. Just couldn't get the ball up onto the green surface and kept rolling it back down to his feet, which, Phil's been known to have some snafus like that, some gaffes like that from time to time. Not many guys are going to be able to get there in 2. Again, it's a 612-yard hole, but not much trouble out there. One of the easier green complexes on the golf course, assuming that you're not falling victim to that false front short of the green. Yeah, I mean, it's 2 shots that give you an easy wedge. Pin location shouldn't be too difficult here, again, with the green complex here being one of the easier on the golf courses. A hilly hole here in what is otherwise a flat layout in Torrey Pines. So it gives a different aesthetic look, which is great about the 13th, but these guys should have no problem with it. 13 in a similar vein to 9, and it shouldn't be a surprise that it's the par 5s that are lending their lending toward a length off the tee and really want us to target length off the tee. But 9 and 13 are the 2 holes in particular that I think are going to be huge for the guys that bomb it off the tee. Will provide them a big advantage. These other holes I really think are mostly about finding the fairway and allowing yourself an opportunity to hold these green surfaces and attack these pins by being able to spin the ball a little bit into the hole and have more control over your ball rather than coming out of the long rough. The 14th is a 434-yard par 4, was the 8th most difficult hole in the 2008 U.S. Open. In 2008, it was actually they played it really short. It was drivable for a few of the rounds. But they say, fuck that this year. We're pushing it back to its original 434 yards. I liked it as the short par 4. It was a lot of fun. But, I understand the USGA knows that these guys are absolutely bombing it nowadays. And they won a golf tournament where the winning score is, probably in that -1, -2, -3 range. Even par, I'm sure they'd be fine with as well. They want this tournament to play difficult. So I understand them pushing this hole back. I imagine most of these guys will be hitting probably like an iron off the tee with it playing at 434 yards, maybe a hybrid, something like that. Shouldn't take much to get it into a comfortable distance for a short iron. You just want to find the fairway here. It played as the 8th most difficult hole in 2008 when it was a drivable par 4. I think it probably remains in a similar place, if not getting a bit easier, as odd as that sounds. I think the risk reward aspect of the hole back in 2008 probably lended toward some more, mistakes, some bigger numbers being taken than otherwise would be taken if the strategy is, pretty obvious, which I think it is this year, which is iron off the tee into the fairway, give yourself a wedge into this hole. You really shouldn't be making worse than a 4, so I would not be surprised if this hole actually got easier this year for these guys, even though it's being lengthened, because the strategy becomes a lot easier as far as what it is that you need to do off the tee and how to play the hole. The 15th is par 4, playing at 480 yards. They will push it all the way back to 513 at some point during the tournament. Played it as the 4th most difficult hole in 2008, and it will be at least that difficult again this year. One of the hardest holes on tour, the 31st most difficult hole in 2019. And that's playing it at the Farmers. So, yeah, it's a monster. Again, back right is the pin location. That's the most difficult. So you're going to want to be in the left to left center of the fairway. It's a long hole, but another hole where you need to find the fairway, or you can basically just chalk up a bogey. So another hole where we're going to need our guys to find the fairway. The 16th, par 3, playing at 223 yards, was the 9th most difficult hole on the golf course in 2008 during that U.S. Open. Going to have lots of different tee options as well. They'll push this hole forward. I don't believe they have, an option to push this hole back. but we'll see if they can push it back behind 223 yards. But they'll certainly push it forward to give these guys a different look. As I mentioned, the U.S. Open, they love to give these guys different looks on the par threes. All you want to do here is hit the middle of the green, 2-putt, walk away with your par. It's a long par 3, right? Like most long par 3s on tour, anything on the green is good. You'll notice that most of these par 3s have been in that, at least 200 yards and then pushing all the way up to 225. They can probably push, some of these back or some of these, number 11, they could probably push back to like 240 yards. But for the most part, yeah, we're seeing 200 to 225 yard range. It is going to be an advantage. These guys that hit their long irons well and play these long par 3s well, obviously, if you can walk away this week without doing damage to yourself on these par 3s, you're going to have a big leg up on the rest of the field. 17th hole, we're almost to the end, guys. Par 4, 440 yards, played as the 12th most difficult hole in 2008. Has a new tee box. They'll be hitting from the cliffs, so it's gonna visually make the fairway look larger than it is. It's actually a bit narrower than these guys than their eyesight, like their eye line will make it look. And balls left will be in trouble. There's a hazard that runs down the left side, so anything left here is not good. You're typically playing this hole downwind, given your orientation to the Pacific Ocean. So it'll play a bit shorter than the 440 yards. These guys, some of the longer hitters might even take an iron off the tee. I expect even the shorter hitters, though, will be able to at least take a 3-wood or something less than driver off the tee. And with bunkers right and the hazard left, again, you're going to have to find the fairway here. Not a hole, I think, that lends itself to bombers, but one, again, that I think lends itself to guys who can just find a fairway and then, be very solid all week on their approaches. And that takes us to the 18th. I mentioned, really, in my opinion, the only hole out here that is a bona fide birdie hole is number 18, par 5. Playing at 568 yards, was the easiest hole on the golf course in 2008. And yeah, I imagine most of these guys in the field will be going at this hole in 2. Bombers, yes, they'll have a bit of an advantage, of course, because they'll be hitting, some of these shorter to mid irons in versus the mid to long irons that some of these shorter players will be hitting in. But I mean, all the players in this field, maybe not all of them, but most of the players in this field, and certainly all of the players in this field that will be rostering on DraftKings, at least have the chops to hit this hole in 2, to get there in 2 here at 568 yards. Your Rorys, your Brysons, your Rahms, your DJs, they're going to have maybe 7 irons into this thing, to be honest with you. Hole that you got to make birdie on. Infamously, obviously, Tiger rolled in the bumpiest 12-footer ever to force a playoff with Rocco Mediate making birdie on this hole. If you're not making birdie on this hole, you feel like you're giving a shot back to the field. So another hole where you're going to need to be able to find the fairway to attack the green in 2. If you find the rough, even if you're one of these longer hitters, good luck getting home in 2. So that's the golf course, guys. That's Torrey Pines. And if you can't tell, it's going to be a tough fucking setup, man. Like 18's the only hole I see that when you come to the tee box, you're like, okay, I need birdie here. Like this is a birdie hole. I'm making a 4, maybe making an eagle 3. Aside from that, it really does feel like you're not going to be upset if you walk off of any hole with a par. So I think par's a good score this week, guys. I think, the winning score probably sits around -3 or something like that. And fairways, they're going to be crucial to hit this week, not only because the rough is absurdly long, if you guys have seen, but also because so many of these holes require having, being able to put some spin on the ball heading into these pin locations, especially these back right pin locations. So while everyone's playing a bomber narrative, and certainly it's going to help, the bombers are going to be helped on holes like 9, hole like 13, maybe some of these shorter par 4s where they can just bomb it out there, and even if they find it in the rough, they can hit a wedge in. But there's really only 1 or 2 of those holes. A majority of these holes lend themselves toward guys that can find the fairway. And if we can find ourselves some maybe, quote unquote shorter hitters, but that have been really, really good at finding fairways and have had really good success in US Opens where you've needed to find the fairway. I have absolutely no issue going to those guys, and they are very low owned this week in comparison to what they would normally be. So that's the approach we're going for this week. No pun intended again. Our statistical model or golfer prototype: strokes gained approach, fairways gained, par fours, 450 to 500 yards, as we mentioned, plenty of those holes out there. Scrambling, because a lot of these greens are going to be missed, obviously, because if you miss a fairway, good luck hitting the green out of the rough, as I've mentioned, or being able to hold the green. And also, as I've mentioned, par's a good score here. So being able to get up and down, going to be huge this week. And due to that, we've also, as we typically do this season, included a sprinkling of strokes gained putting. My winner comes out of actually the mid-shelf and toward the bottom end of the mid-shelf, which doesn't feel great for a U.S. Open. You usually want to take one of these blue chip players, and if I did take a blue chip, it would be Jordan Spieth. Again, we're going against the grain this week. We're trying to find, and Spieth, a guy who can just absolutely work magic no matter where he puts his tee ball, but has been hitting his driver much, much better. One of the best players on approach this year, so I really did want to look at Spieth, just not quite trustworthy enough off the tee for my taste, but I went with the guy in the mid-shelf, and he's not even at the top end of the mid-shelf. So drop in the comments who you think my winner is, as well as who your winner is for the 2021 U.S. Open. And with that, we can spark up. I'm going to get a little drink of collagen water. Shout out to my sister for sending me that. It's awesome. Drinking some, what is this? Blueberry mint, Vital Proteins, collagen water. Stuff's delicious. I'm a respark. We only have 2 top shelf plays this week. Top shelf plays are $10,000 or more in DraftKings pricing, and we'll get to those after I spark back up. Alrighty. The first top shelf play for the 2021 U.S. Open is Mr. Jordan Spieth at $10,900, 7.5% projected ownership. Spieth coming in 6th in the custom model, 8th on approach, 24th with the putter, 66th in fairways gained. Again, that was my concern in picking him as my winner. 4th in scrambling, though, he can work some magic. And 15th in that par 4 range, 450 to 500 yards. Obviously comes in great form. Previous U.S. Open champion at Chambers Bay, which, as a matter of fact, I think is a pretty decent comp, especially now. I mean, I'll definitely be using this golf tournament for if and when, the U.S. Open goes back to Chambers Bay. Chambers now has those POA greens. I know, remember, they were starting to take over the green services back at that U.S. Open in 2015, I believe it was. And that golf course really got away from them. They just went ahead and made the full change to POA. And, it's, I believe, going to, as a U.S. Open setup, be very similar to what we'll see this week at Torrey. So I'll definitely be using whatever happens this week to hopefully, if we get a U.S. Open here soon back at Chambers Bay, to use this golf course as a comp for Chambers, especially now that Chambers went to POA greens. But I do like that Spieth, winner at Chambers Bay, can play U.S. Opens well, can work that magic. And he's only 7.5% in projected ownership. I mean, he's regained his peak Spieth form, and if people aren't going to be on him, I understand that a longer golf course like this, for the most part, is one that folks would think Jordan Spieth won't succeed at, but he won at Chambers Bay, and that was another par 71 that was playing long in like the 74 to 7,500 yard range. Yes, it did take Dustin Johnson falling apart and Brendan Grace hitting one into the train tracks on the 16th, but I mean, Jordan Spieth walked away with the trophy, and I think he is under-owned here. The price tag is difficult to get to, I won't lie, but I mean, Jon Rahm's up at $11,200, twice as owned as Spieth. I'll take the price discount and the ownership discount on Spieth. Rahm coming back from COVID, emotionally, you have to wonder how he feels having to withdraw after round 3 of the Memorial while holding a 6-stroke lead. So Jordan Spieth, where I'll kick it off at $10,900, 7.5% projected ownership. And then I'll move to Brooks Koepka here in the top shelf. We played him at the PGA. Unfortunately, he somehow couldn't hold off Phil Mickelson. But, saw everything I needed to see from Brooks at the PGA there. Did not play great at the Palmetto, missing the cut last week, but did strike the ball well, gained in ball striking. So no concerns for Brooks heading into a major, especially a U.S. Open. The U.S. Opens and the PGA Championships, we all know that's Brooks' bread and butter. 17.5% projected ownership is high, but, it's a major. We're going to go out there. We're going to grab our guy. Brooks looking like a phenomenal play. You can't fade this guy completely in a U.S. Open or a PGA Championship, in my opinion. He comes to play in all of them, except when he obviously has to withdraw, like he did last year, heading into Winged Foot. But if he's teeing it up, man, I want some Brooks Koepka in the U.S. Open. So $10,100 is a price tag that's much easier to get to than Spieth's $10,900. Although, the ownership reflects that at 17.5%. So if I'm playing up here on the top shelf, I'm grabbing Spieth and I'm grabbing Koepka. You can obviously make a case for any of these guys, right? The guys I left off: Rahm, DJ, Bryson. For Rahm, he's the one I feel least comfortable with, coming off of COVID, not really knowing where his game's going to be. DJ did play well last week at Congaree, so you can definitely look to DJ. And Bryson, Bryson's just been one of the best golfers in the world for well over a year now, so you can always fire him up. But I'd rather either take the full price discount down to Brooks, even though we're looking at a 17.5% projected ownership, or pay up for Spieth to get that ownership discount as the least projected owned player above $10,000. He is the least projected owned player up here in the top shelf, and he's been playing as good of golf as he's played in his career, and we know what happens when Jordan Spieth's doing that. He can get magical with that putter, and if he does, a golf tournament where even par might win the golf tournament is one that Jordan Spieth's putter can carry him through to victory in. And that takes us to the mid-shelf. Mid-shelf plays are $7,500 or more in DraftKings pricing. And the first mid-shelf play is a very easy one to mention because he's in the mid-shelf somehow and not in the top shelf. It's Rory McIlroy. $9,900 price tag, 14.8% projected ownership. It's Rory in the mid-shelf. If Rory if Rory is in peak driving form, there will be no bigger weapon on this golf course than that. He, DJ, Bryson, if those guys are driving the ball well, they're going to be almost impossible to catch, right? Like with their distance, if they're also hitting fairways, it's just going to be unfair. So to get Rory down here in the mid-shelf, he's really the reason why I'll forego Bryson and DJ. It's because I feel like I can get sort of the same thing at a significantly reduced price. And not even like that much more ownership. As a matter of fact, Bryson's projected for more ownership at 15%, and DJ projected for slightly less at 13%. So I'll just take the pricing discount on Rory at $9,900, 14.8% projected ownership. Feels like a pretty disrespectful price, honestly, on one Rory McIlroy. Next guy I like, we're looking at strokes gained approach, so this guy always pops up when we do. It's Mr. Colin Morikawa. You guessed it, $9,500 price tag, 14.4% projected ownership. Morikawa is going to need to find fairways this week. If he can find fairways, his long iron game and his iron game in general is going to be such an asset to him around this golf course. It would be second to the driving abilities I mentioned of Rory, Bryson, and DJ. The long iron and just really the approach abilities of Morikawa would be the next, best asset to have if it's in peak form. So love myself some Colin Morikawa. If he's hitting fairways, he's going to be live to win as well. $9,500 price tag, 14.4% projected ownership. Morikawa is coming in the custom model 26th, 23rd on approach, 98th with the putter, but Morikawa presents lots of upside with the putter. He's either running hot or cold typically. 17th in fairways gained, so he's been hitting fairways lately, which we love to see. As long as he's hitting fairways and giving himself an opportunity to use his approach prowess, that's really what we're looking for here out of Morikawa. So, liking myself some Colin Morikawa at that price tag and projected ownership. And also, coming off a loss in a playoff, we know Morikawa can perform well. He lost a playoff to Daniel Berger prior to going in and winning the workday. Now, is that the same thing as coming into a U.S. Open? No, but it's still nice to see that, mentally he can come back and be prepared to win an event after losing in a playoff. The next mid-shelf play, and honestly, I'll probably end up fading more so than anything else just due to ownership projection. It's Xander Schauffele, $9,300 price tag, 17.7% projected ownership. Played really well at the Farmers this year, which I should mention was won by Patrick Reed. Xander came second in that event. He's a San Diego kid, so he'll be, right around home here. Well, he will be at home here. Coming in 11th in the custom model, 31st on approach, 12th in putting, 61st in fairways gained, 9th in scrambling, and 13th in that par 4 range, 450 to 500 yards. The 17.7% projected ownership is why I think I might just go to one of these other guys that just is lower owned. I don't know. It feels like there's more win equity with a guy like Morikawa. Even a guy like JT, who I'm actually not going to play this week just because I'm really concerned about his ability to hit a fairway. But, I still feel like he obviously has more win equity than Xander in an event like this. And to pay only $400 more to move up to a JT, at 9% projected ownership, so half of what Xander is, the ownership just feels out of whack for Xander. I think maybe a little too much stock's being taken in the fact that he's a San Diego kid. He's actually a guy who's kind of struggled in the past in events that played in San Diego. Kind of broke away from that at the Farmers this year. But he does stat out well. The ownership does not feel correct given how some of the players around him are owned, and some of the players cheaper than him are owned as well. So Xander, had to mention him at 9,300, but at 17.7% projected ownership, I will probably fade. I would rather play Patrick Reed, as I mentioned, who was your winner of the Farmers, $9,000 flat, 15.9% projected ownership. As I mentioned, I don't really care about stats with Reed for the most part. The concern here, 103rd in strokes gained approach over his last 12 measured rounds in this field, but Reed can literally turn it on at the flick of a switch, and he typically does in big events, major championships, Ryder Cups, President's Cups. He comes to play. He's second in strokes gained putting over his last 12 measured rounds in this field, so love to see him riding a hot putter coming in. 40th in fairways gained, which is fine by me. Second in scrambling and second in that par 4 range, 450 to 500 yards. Love myself some Patrick Piggy Reed. Almost also made him my winner of the event. I don't know, just felt a little too gimmicky picking the guy who won the Farmers at this venue earlier this year, at the beginning of this year. So I went ahead and dug a bit deeper down into the mid-shelf. So we have still not gotten to my winner of the event. Again, drop in the comments who you think my winner of the 2021 U.S. Open is, and drop who you have to take down the trophy. My next play, I love the projected ownership on this guy. Webb Simpson, $8,700 price tag, 9.2% projected ownership. A guy who chalks up top, he loves top 25ing in the U.S. Open. Don't necessarily know if he has the upside to win it because, typically you have to be a bit longer off the tee to take the tournament down. But Rocco Mediate was played a 19-hole playoff with Tiger Woods in 2008. You don't have to be the longest off the tee at Torrey. Webb coming in 9th in the custom model, 6th on approach, 66th in putting, 41st in fairways gained, 79th in scrambling, and 28th in that par 4 range, 450 to 500 yards. Let's get Webb's performances in U.S. Opens here recently. So, Webb at last year's U.S. Open. Did he tee it up? Yes, he did. Came 8th. In 2019, he came 16th. In 2018, he came 10th. In 2017, he came 35th. And we'll go back one more year to 2016 where he missed the cut. So you have to go all the way back to 2016 for a missed cut for Webb. 2017 was at 35th. And other than that, he's been in that top 10 territory. So I think he's being severely undervalued just because the public is chasing driving distance and distance off the tee. I think Webb, very undervalued at this price tag and projected ownership. $8,700, 9.2% projected ownership. Surprised at the projected ownership of this guy, considering, the profile that people are chasing, but he is pretty cheap. Will Zalatoris, $8,600 price tag, 16.5% projected ownership, coming in 19th in the custom model, 15th on approach, 71st in putting, 78th in fairways gained, 36th in scrambling, and 30th in the par 4 range, 450 to 500 yards. Zalatoris just been playing great golf, and similarly to what I said about Morikawa, he's sort of like a poor man's Morikawa. If his iron game is at its peak, it is going to be one of the best assets that you can have around Torrey Pines South Course this week. So I do like me some Zalatoris at that $8,600 price tag and 16.5% projected ownership. A similar play, just love the projected ownership for a guy who's been striking the ball so well. Was terrible on approach last time we saw him a couple weeks ago, but Corey Connors, 6.9% projected ownership for Connors. $8,200 price tag is a bit steep for a guy like Corey Connors, in my opinion, who lost 4.4 strokes on approach, as I mentioned, at Memorial. But man, coming in second in the custom model, second on approach in this field over the last 12 measured rounds, 54th with the putter, which actually is pretty solid for Corey Connors. Third in fairways gained, so he's second on approach and third in fairways gained. 72nd in scrambling and fifth in the par 4 range, 450 to 500 yards. No joke, if Corey Connors brings his best ball striking stuff, he might lead this field in greens and regulation with his ability to hit fairways and, stuff it on approach. And if he does, he'll definitely pay off this price tag. So even though he's shorter off the tee, 6.9% projected ownership for a guy who's done nothing but be one of the best ball strikers in the world all year. And yes, he did lose 4.4 strokes on approach last time we saw him, but Corey Connors has not lost back-to-back. He has not lost strokes on approach in back-to-back events for it's been a ridiculous amount of events. I went through it a couple days ago, and it's at least 40 events since Corey Connors has lost strokes on approach in back-to-back events. So I love Corey Connors to bounce back with the performance on approach this week. And if he does, you couple that with how he's been hitting it off the tee and how many fairways he's been hitting. I love his prospects this week. 6.9% projected ownership. $8,100, Mr. Louis Oosthuizen. 17.3% projected ownership, though. I hate. I just love playing Louis when he's lower owned, but he warrants the ownership. Louis been absolutely balling lately. 27th in the custom model, 40th on approach, 10th in putting, 18th in fairways gained, 49th in scrambling, and 96th in that par 4 range, 450 to 500 yards. But Louis shows up in these big events, these major championships, obviously. His major performances so far this season: came second at the PGA Championship and 26th at the Masters. Was third in the U.S. Open last year at Winged Foot. Obviously is a guy that you like to back in a difficult golf tournament. Not much bad to say about Louis here, other than 17.3% projected ownership. Not great. Not my favorite, but still, I think I will be firing up some Louis Oosthuizen, even though he's popular this week, because, man, he loves these big events. He's a gamer, and he's been in great form. Hard not to like him this week. Next player in the mid-shelf is Mr. Abraham Answer. $7,900 price tag, 11.8% projected ownership, and ding, 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 ding! Yes! I'm backing Abraham motherfucking Answer to win the 2021 U.S. Open. Torrey Pines South Course. Not many people are going to be on this pick, I'd imagine. Again, because people are looking, rightfully so, looking to, blue chip elite players, because typically those are the players that win the US Open, and also looking to players that, have distance off the tee. And I completely understand it. If, a DJ, a Rory, a Bryson brings their A plus game, they're going to win. Like, no one's going to be able to catch them. So I completely understand that take. But if we do get them, to play at like a B plus, an A minus, and we get an A plus type of performance from a guy like Abraham Ancer, I think it's going to be close. Ancer coming in first in the custom model, 11th on approach, 5th in putting, 6th in fairways gained, 26th in scrambling, and first in this par 4 range, 450 to 500 yards. This guy can play a difficult golf course well. He can play a long and difficult golf course well, and he's kind of sneaky about it. 11.8%, I think, people who are digging into statistical models like me are probably, surprised to see just how well Ancer is rating out. And I think that's why his ownership projection's up at 11.8%. But when I think it comes time to actually click Ancer into lineups, I think a lot of those folks aren't going to do it because, as I mentioned, a lot of them are looking at, driving distance. And Ancer, that's not something that he brings to the table. So I've got Abraham Ancer to win this week. You can find him at some pretty good numbers in the betting odds. I recommend you go out and check that out. Try and grab maybe like a top 10, top 5, as well as the outright win on Mr. Ancer, because he sneakily plays these types of golf courses well, and I really like his outlook for this week. So Abraham Ancer, I'll be owning plenty of him. Again, $7,900 price tag, 11.8% projected ownership. In the last play of the mid-shelf, Mr. Sergio Garcia, $7,500 price tag, 3.2% projected ownership on Sergio. Sure, why not? Coming in 16th in the custom model, 12th on approach, 103rd in putting, 72nd in fairways gained, 58th in scrambling, and 25th in that par 4 range, 450 to 500 yards. If Sergio's going to get it done, he's going to have to find fairways and perform off the back of his irons. One of the best approach players in the field, and certainly one of the best long iron players in this field. I mentioned over our course preview just how big of an asset being able to hit those long irons, high and be able to have them be received into the green well will be. Sergio, definitely a guy that can do that, generates a lot of speed through the golf ball, and a great long iron player. So if Sergio brings it with the driver this week and can find, more fairways than he's been finding lately, I really like him at a $7,500 price tag. And with that, we're into the SCHWAG bag. The best part, and the SCHWAG bag for the fucking USO, you get some names down here in major championships. Like, you get people who we know, like people who we're usually playing in the mid-shelf down here in the SCHWAG bag for these major championships. So the SCHWAG bag is fun for these events, and we still have some crazy fucking low ownership. And it's, again, because, man, I don't, actually, you know what? You would imagine... Yeah, we have pretty crazy low ownership for the SCHWAG bag, given how high owned, or how high the projected ownership is. I'm sorry, for some of these top shelf guys, all at 15%. So yeah, people really digging into that mid 7K range and the low 7K range. Looks like Shane Lowry at $7,600, getting a lot of ownership. Jason Kokrak at $7,600, getting a lot of ownership. So that's where the salary savings are coming in. People really digging into that mid 7K range. Sergio Garcia, a good pivot in that range. Or you can pivot by paying up a little bit at the top and then saving yourself some money and dipping down here into this SCHWAG bag, because outside of one player down here, we've got some pretty low ownership in the SCHWAG bag, guys. So I'm going to spark back up, get another drink. We're going to get into the best part of the show. And this blueberry mint collagen water slaps. So good. The first swag bag play is for you psychos out there, psychos and sickos who want to feel maximum pain or maximum pleasure. Lee Westwood, $7,300 price tag, 1.2% projected ownership. And Westwood, as you guys probably remember, was playing great golf earlier this season in what's seemingly been the season of the old man. You know, Stewart Cink's won a couple times. Westwood's knocked on the door a couple times. Phil's won the PGA championship. Like, this is the season of the old man. And, you know, Westwood's been bad in back-to-back events. Charles Schwab missed the cut. Did gain on approach, but lost half a stroke off the tee. At the PGA championship, came 71st, so not a good performance. Lost 0.8 strokes on approach, but gained 2.5 strokes off the tee. And prior to that, he'd been playing some pretty decent golf, at least heading into like the Masters. Came second at the Arnold Palmer, came second at the Players. This is back in March, of course, but has a good history at the U.S. Open. Was 13th in last year's U.S. Open at Winged Foot. Can really grind. You want him in a tournament where, you know, grinding and par being a good score is a good thing. So I do think Westwood presents, I mean, he's a little under-owned at 1.2% is what I'll say. Because $7,300, he's really easy to fit into your lineup. And given his past U.S. Open success, as well as his success so far this year on tour, maybe not in, you know, the very recent form, but overall this year on tour, it's been a great year for Westwood. So wouldn't be surprised to see him have a good week. Harris English, also at $7,300, much safer play than Westwood, 6.4% projected ownership, coming in 25th in the custom model, 54th on approach, 35th in putting, 28th in fairways gained, 56th in scrambling, and 50th in that par 4 range, 450 to 500 yards. Let me make sure this thing's still going. So yeah, I mean, English is a guy that we can count on to hit some fairways around here. And if he does, he has the chops on approach to cash those in, right? So Harris English fitting the model of the player that we're looking for this week, even though it is against the grain of driving distance. If he can find enough fairways as he has been lately, I like that around this golf course. Strict ownership and talent play. I don't really think the course fit is that good, but, I mean, if he's playing well, then fuck it. Siwoo Kim, $7,300, 3.3% projected ownership. Like, Siwoo Kim, when Siwoo Kim is peak Siwoo Kim, can hang with the big boys. Like, he brings the heat. Like, he is live to win. I mean, he's won the Players Championship, right? Like, he can win serious events. Coming in 30th in the custom model, 36th on approach, 65th in putting, 87th in fairways gained. That's our big concern with Siwoo. 44th in scrambling, and 4th in the par 4 range, 450 to 500 yards. It's going to be, can Siwoo hit enough fairways and make enough putts this week? And typically, I don't love Siwoo at a golf course where I just sort of want steady Eddie, you know, being able to grind out some pars. He's more of a volatile scorecard typically, but we'll see if he can make it work around here. I mean, at 3.3%, I'm firing up some Siwoo. I don't give a shit. The guy's too talented not to. The guy that's drawing all the ownership, sucking up all the ownership down here because they underpriced him, is Charlie Hoffman at $7,200, 13.7% projected ownership, and he's mispriced for as well as he's been playing lately and this season. Just straight up. Hoffman coming in 12th in the custom model, 20th on approach, 17th in putting, 33rd in fairways gained, 3rd in scrambling, 74th in the par 4 range, 450 to 500 yards is the only statistic that he doesn't, you know, rate out in the top third of the field in. Hoffman's been playing great golf lately. You don't have to question it. At $7,200, that's just such a great price tag. Fire up Chuck Hoffman. Matt Kuchar, $7,100 price tag, has 1.2% projected ownership. That's the only reason you're playing him, is because of the projected ownership. But plays these long golf courses well. 7th in the custom model, 26th on approach, 33rd in putting, 22nd in fairways gained, 34th in scrambling, and 36th in the par 4 range, 450 to 500 yards. It's a cheap price to fit in a guy like Matt Kuchar. and 1.2% projected ownership. I feel like Kuchar can make a cut around here. He's just going to need to find all the fairways, right? So Matt Kuchar, $7,100, 1.2% projected ownership. Again, a max pain, max pleasure play like Lee Westwood. I would much rather, I feel much more comfortable with Matt Wallace at this $7,100 price tag. 9.4% projected ownership. I'll be playing a lot of Wallace this week. Wallace coming in 4th in the custom model, 4th on approach, 40th in putting, 57th in fairways gained, 13th in scrambling, and 10th in that par 4 range, 450 to 500 yards. He is and I always mention this, I feel like they've been pricing Matt Wallace down with players that aren't of his caliber at this current point in time. Matt Wallace, a better player than Matt Kuchar, in my opinion. Better player than Christian Bezadenhout. Garrick Higgo's priced above him, obviously coming off of the win, but still, I'm not so certain. I want to say Garrick Higgo should be priced with Matt Wallace. So, liking myself some Matt Wallace. This golf course, it should actually be a good fit for Wallace. He's one of the guys who I'm looking at that has a little more distance off the tee, but also hits fairways and has tons of upside on approach. So, love Matt Wallace this week. The only other guy really that I look at $7,100, I might get to one Kuchar lineup. I'll mostly be playing Wallace, and then I might sprinkle in Kevin Streelman, also at $7,100. Maybe I can play some of these guys together. Streelman at 8.7% projected ownership, coming in 5th in the custom model. And we really have to worry about Streelman's inability to scramble. It's why I was worried about him at the PGA Championship, and of course, he went on to have an awesome week scrambling. One of the few awesome weeks he's had in recent memory. Scrambling. So that's where Streelman's going to be a concern, but he's 4th in fairways gained, 13th on approach, so the ball striking is going to be phenomenal. 8.7%, not too hefty a price tag to pay. And actually, it sounds like I was wrong. I lied. Ryan Palmer at $7,100, another guy I'm okay looking at, coming in 13th in the custom model, 21st on approach, 20th in putting, 59th in fairways gained, 23rd in scrambling, and 34th in the par 4 range, 450 to 500 yards. Checks every box, which is, hard to do down here at a $7,100 price tag, in the top half of the field in every statistic we're looking at. So do like Ryan Palmer as well. And now we get to throw some bombs. Our first bomb is Mr. Bo Hoag. $6,700 price tag, 0.7% projected ownership. Hoag plays these long golf courses sneaky well. Obviously, he's going to need to putt well. That's really what's going to carry Bo Hoag. But from a ball striking standpoint, plays them better than you would think. 43rd in strokes gained approach, 3rd in strokes gained putting, 50th in fairways gained, 35th in scrambling, and 45th in par 4s, 450 to 500 yards. So going to have to be carried by the putter, but just sneaky solid ball striking numbers down at a $6,700 price tag on these long, difficult golf courses. So Bo Hoag, $6,700, 0.7% projected ownership. You will be dancing if he makes the cut. That's the goal if you're playing him down here. And a guy with a little more upside, I think, than Hoag. I don't even think. He has more upside than Hoag, and I would rather go to him. And you can get happier than just a miscut because he has history of a top 10 in a major. It's Jordan L. Smith at $6,600, 0.5% projected ownership. You might remember him from, I believe, the 2017 PGA Championship. He came 9th. Where were we that year? We were at Quail. Yeah, we were at Quail that year. So at Quail Hollow, another, long, difficult golf course, as most of these major championship venues are. So has top 10 chops in a major before, right? So he shows us that he has upside to have a performance like that. And let's take a look at his recent finishes on the Euro Tour. Because they're worth noting. T11 at the Porsche European Open. The Maiden Himmerland, Maiden Denmark, I believe is what it's referred to as, came T3. The Betfred British Masters, hosted by Danny Willett, came T17. So a T11, a T3, a T17 in his last 3 events. Shows that Jordan L. Smith's in good form. Just looking at all of these, again, guys, I researched all of the players in the field, and looking at every single one of the players down here, I don't think any of them really present the major tournament upside that Jordan L. Smith has already shown he possesses. And on top of that, he's coming in good form. So I will be playing some Jordan L. Smith at 0.5% projected ownership. If we can get a top 10 out of this guy, I mean, our lineups are absolutely set up for success. Gives you plenty of money to play around with at the top of your roster. And, it certainly makes your lineups unique, right? And the goal is to go get that fucking millie this week, guys. So Jordan L. Smith rounds out the SCHWAG bag plays for the week, rounds out the plays for the 2021 U.S. Open. Make sure you like and comment on the video who you think is going to win the 2021 U.S. Open. Subscribe to the channel. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast on Spotify, Apple Music, Stitcher, wherever you like to listen to your podcasts. We're taking down that millie. Get in your Abraham Answer outrights, folks, because it's time to get that cash. It's time to hit the green, baby. I love you, HTG crew. I will see you next week to recap this fucking awesome event. And look for me at Torrey Pines at the U.S. Open. Peace.